Michael Lowery began his career as a bio major, entering the tech industry in the late 90s and early 2000s. However, after the dot-com bubble burst, he found himself working as a teacher at a low-income school in Charlotte, North Carolina. After making an unlikely move to Berlin, Germany, he began his international teaching career, heading to a school in the Bahamas and continuing his teaching capacity in China. Now, Mr. Lowery is working as a teacher at the Village School. Mr. Lowery, however, maintains his identity as an international teacher to start a next academic year in a new country somewhere in Southeast Asia. We hope you enjoy our conversation with him.
So, welcome back to the International Career Club podcast. I'm here with Mr. Lowery, a teacher at the Village School. He's worked in schools all over the world and has a vast array of experience in the educational sector, especially internationally. How are you, Mr. Lowery?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
I wanted to start off by first off giving you a background. Maybe you run through your education and then your job roles.
Okay, I guess first of all, I came into education probably differently than most people. My degree is in biology with a minor in chemistry. When I was graduating from college, I was looking at biotechnology jobs, and then I ended up actually going and working for a nonprofit organization that meant a lot to me. I did that for a couple years, and then I went and worked for another nonprofit. And then I got the opportunity with a bunch of guys who were starting a brand new tech company. And so for 2.5 years, I worked in the tech industry in the dot-com era. And then what happened is my dot-com went under in 2002. And that's when the dot-com bubble burst. There was a lot of unemployed technology people, and I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina. And at the time, Charlotte is a large school district, 180 schools, I think is the number on it. And they have hundreds of openings on the first day of school every year. So I went ahead and applied for a science teacher position. I worked 5 years in a high poverty situation, school in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then my principal at that school became the principal of a school in Germany. She asked me if I wanted to work there. I said no. She said, well, you're hired, congratulations, see you in August. And because I had such a great relationship with her, I basically had to get up and move to Berlin. So worked 5 years in Berlin, Germany. Then I got my master's in administration. I then went to the Bahamas, where I was the high school principal and headmaster. And then after that, my family and I decided to go back in the classroom. I ended up going to China. I was there 2018 to 2022 during the COVID time, and that's what brought us back to the United States, is not seeing family and friends. So that's a quick summary.
Got it. And to go back, when you decided to take that teaching opening job in North Carolina, it did seem that you're kind of bouncing off your old career, you're trying to find some employment. When you joined that job, were you seeing teaching as a long-term pursuit, or was it a way to get back on your feet?
Well, I did really financially well, so I didn't actually need to get back on my feet during the dot-com era. They were paying me a ridiculous amount of money, and I had a feeling that the bubble was going to burst, so I was very conservative about all my spending. I got a huge kind of severance package when we went under because of just how financially worked. But I kind of felt, because I had that nonprofit background, I kind of missed, giving back. So, and I felt like teaching was a way of giving back. I really had a strong bond with a lot of my teachers when I was in high school. They were real inspiring, and I always thought that would be a great thing to do. So, I thought I would give it a try. If I liked it, I would stay. If I didn't, I would go find something else to fall back into biology or on that.
For sure. And when you took that first job in Berlin, Germany, I'm sure you weren't accustomed to the change immediately.
Before I moved to Berlin, I didn't speak a word of German. So, and if you know anything about Germany, there's a lot of English spoken in southern Germany, like Munich, Frankfurt. English is not as common in Berlin, so it was a little bit difficult. And anybody who's worked international wakes up one morning after their first international gig and says, what did I do? And I remember that distinctly, of sitting in my apartment in Berlin, of like, what did I do? I don't speak German. I'm teaching at this school, but the one benefit of international teaching is that, and a lot of people have always asked me like, oh, so you just teach English? You're teaching German kids English, you're teaching Chinese kids English, because the way companies are multinational, people need schools in English to teach all of the normal subjects. So I've worked at international schools that teach in English, but it's just like teaching in a normal U.S. school from the content and subject matter of it. But there's a lot of benefits in international teaching as well. So I got over that what did I do moment.
For sure. And you spent 5 years in Germany,
Yeah.
is that correct?
Yeah.
And then you moved to a totally different place in the world. China, I'm sure, was a big step. What was the motivating factors for that, and what propelled you to this position?
Well, the Germany, I love living in Berlin, and Berlin is such an incredible city. But after you've worked there, on the school that I worked in, after you've worked there 5 years, they now view you as a local as opposed to an international teacher. So a lot of the financial perks kind of went away. And so that's also what was happening in our family at the same time. My wife and I just had our daughter, and it just so happened the position in the Bahamas opened up, which the Bahamas is 53 miles from the United States, allowed us to be closer to family, so grandparents could meet their granddaughter and all that type of thing. So it kind of worked out. And then also at the same time, I was getting my degree in administration, and this principalship opened up. So it kind of was like all the stars aligned for us to go there. The Germany financially was becoming not a great deal because of losing all the perks. Going to the Bahamas ended up checking a lot of boxes. And then when I became headmaster of the school, I was quite invested in that. We have 3 children. My sons were born in the Bahamas. But after 6 years of down there in the Bahamas, we kind of wanted something else. And we were open to pretty much anywhere in the world, but we chose Asia. The first reason why we wanted to go to Asia is because we hadn't spent much in that part of the world, and we wanted to experience that life. The second is, from a teaching perspective, Asian schools tend to pay better. They pay better housing stipends, and then the students in general at the school are very academically focused. So it's like an elevated teaching environment where the kids really are pushing you as an educator to get them the most knowledge possible.
For sure. And what I find interesting about what you said about the local, becoming local after 5 years, that's similar to corporate, and that's what motivates people in corporate to move around quite a bit. That's why a lot of people at this school move around.
Yeah.
So in the Bahamas, you were headmaster principal, and then you transitioned back to a teacher in China. Was that a difficult transition?
No, not really, because in the heart of it, I've always been a teacher first. Even when I was headmaster, I was not required to, but I still taught a class every year. I'm a believer that what keeps us adults young is hanging out with students every day, and so it's kind of selfish for me. Student contact keeps me grounded and young.
For sure.
On that, so
I see that for sure.
Yeah.
Every day in class. So how do you weigh the different parts of the world? I have beliefs of I really prefer Asia. I think it's an interesting place. Where do you fall in that?
Well, I think every place has its perk, and in Germany, actually, in all 3 places I've lived internationally, I find local people. A lot of people get afraid to move places because of governments. Because I don't want to go to China because it's a communist country. I don't want to go to this place because of religion or something like that. And the first time I went to China, which was 10 years before we moved there, I found them to be the nicest and friendliest people on the planet. And like people just out of their way in China always were coming up and helping us out. And that's kind of what, when we were looking at different places and why we chose to move to China, it's based on not on a political decision or anything about the people or religion or anything like that. It's about these people there. Everybody on the planet basically has the same reason we get up in the morning. We want to, work at a place that we love. We want to provide for our family. We want to have good time with friends and enjoy people. And yeah, there's language barriers and that type of stuff, but it's also when you make friends and meet people in other countries, you really start to share your culture, and you get really close. One of my closest friends I've ever met was a Lebanese guy who lived in Berlin, and he and I were so close the whole time we were there. And I would never have met him if I wouldn't have taken that jump out of my comfort zone to do that big move. I have very close friends who are German, who still live in Germany. I was very close friends with a lot of locals. And that's one of the things, though, I find with international teaching. There's a couple different people out here doing it. I do enjoy the travel and the experience part of it, but there's some people that's their main motivation, is just to see the world. I've always been, because I've stayed longer at places, I've always felt like meeting local people and really getting immersed into this. And the more that you meet other people who are different than you, you find out how more similar you actually are.
I really like what you said about how people get drawn back because of the political feelings, and they have imposed assumptions about different countries. And I think that speaks really a lot to China, because it's a beautiful place with beautiful people, and a lot of people are held back because they have different assumptions of different places. And obviously, reasonably, people are worried, how will I move from the United States to a completely foreign country and learn? One thing though about teaching, which I think is interesting, I've been to international schools, your friends do tend to be that community. You do seem to blend into that community, so it does give you some cushion.
And actually, it's actually like moving to China is an insane thing to do when you don't speak the language or anything. You're moving into a place that literally you're uncomfortable every single day. So you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And my wife and myself and my children, we kind of enjoy the comfort and the puzzle of every day of trying to figure things out. Hey, I can't read that, or I couldn't understand what they just said. Are we getting off at the right train stop? Stuff like that. How do you figure things out? So it almost adds a little bit of spice. And then the other part is you feel a great sense of accomplishment when you figured those things out. So that's one of the other perks of what we liked. But while jumping into moving to China seems like a very bold move, just like you said, you're in a community of, at my last school, there was about 200 of us, international teachers, from all over the world, and we all speak the same language, and everybody speaks English, and a whole community forms from that. There was, as an interesting group of us that are all of us guys and our wives. We all work together. The men work together and the women work together. And us guys would get together and we'd go out bowling or playing golf or something like that. And the ladies would get together and do, whatever they were doing. But in that group, none of us were from the same country. We were literally, there was 8 guys and we were from 8 different countries. And our commonality was that we were teachers, and it was just a great way to meet people from other parts of the world, become close friends. And it's it's still people I talk to today. I mean, every month we get together on conference calls. My closest friends on the planet are the people that I worked with in Berlin, Germany. It was a unique experience where there was 26 teachers. We were all moving to Berlin kind of to experience the same thing. So we traveled together, we ate meals together, we figured things out together. So yeah, it's in some ways like the international teaching is an easier jump into the international world because you're being introduced with a bunch of other people who have kind of the same goals as you.
Right, for sure. And a parallel to a different conversation I had with somebody who's in corporate, and his job is he comes into every role as a manager, and his employees are local, so then he has to connect, and it becomes a different path to go down.
Yeah, and it's a little bit harder like that going in as the headmaster of a school.
Yeah.
You know, you manage all of these people,
Mhm.
as opposed to a teacher. You know,
Yeah.
that transition is a lot easier.
And then you came back to the U.S.
Yeah.
How was that transition? I know there's a lot less of that teacher to teacher. You kind of like start focusing on your own life.
Yeah. Ironically enough, that was probably the biggest culture shock of any of my moves, was actually moving back to the United States, because the country has changed so much from when I left. Well, now I was gone 15 years.
Mhm.
That was 18 years ago.
Right.
So I left in 2007, 17 years ago, this 18th school year.
Yeah.
And it was probably more difficult because the other part about it, well, one, I'm at a school where the community is not there as much. When we're all done, everybody goes home. They're hanging out with their parents, their families, their relatives, and so we are more of an island here. But like the other part that this used to happen to my friends that would go international. They'd come international for a couple years, then they'd move back home, and they would always struggle with their friends because a lot of people have always said to me, "Oh, I would love to do that," but then when given the opportunity, it's scary. It is a scary situation to move to a country where you don't speak the language, you can't read the language, and it's a leap of faith. And a lot of people here, jealous isn't the right word, but they don't know how to relate because most of my experiences go against their culture. And the best example I have of that is when people here in the States who were here during COVID tell me what it was like to live in China during COVID. And when I tell them what really was happening there, which was phenomenal, it was actually the Chinese government handled that wonderfully for especially someone who had young children at the time. Our lives went back to normal. I was teaching in front of students in April 2020. And I was teaching my students, and I taught them for the next 2 years face to face with minimal online presence on that. Things were strict in where we could go and limited, but on the other end, it was safe. We knew we weren't going to get COVID. And so it's interesting to hear people because they have their own prejudices, beliefs. They hear something on their favorite TV show here, a news channel, and that becomes gospel without any actual experience. And that's probably why I enjoy being an international teacher the most, is because I don't like to take my opinion from your experience. I want to go experience that on my own and then form my own opinion on things.
Got that. And I think that's so like enriching, especially in right now when so many people are just driven by somebody said this and somebody said that, and there's so much noise out there. That's hard to navigate all that.
Yeah, it is. And that's like with China as the example. I love Chinese people. They are just so friendly and helpful. Anytime I got into a situation where I couldn't speak the language, out of the blue would come somebody and they could speak fluent English and they were so happy to help.
Yeah.
And I mean, that happens in other countries too, but everybody's just always happy that you're there and they're so welcoming. So, especially to share their culture.
For sure. And now that you're here in the U.S., you do tend to move around. Is it a fair assumption to say that your next move will be somewhere else across the world?
Yeah, it is actually. Our plan, we actually probably would never have moved back to the United States if it wasn't for COVID.
Okay.
I enjoyed the school that I worked at, and my family did as well, so much that we probably would have stayed and retired in Suzhou, which is outside of Shanghai. However, because we could leave the country, it was just difficult to get back in during the COVID time. And you can't just quit your job in the middle of a pandemic. So we stayed, and basically it had been 3 years since we had gone home. And so we decided in 2021 that would be our last year there, that we would come home for 3 years and then go international again. And so this is my 3rd year here at the Village School. And our plan is to go back international, most likely back to Asia somewhere. We've got a long list of countries that we would love to check out and live. Welcome to go back to China, especially Shanghai is like top on our list. But Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Korea are all interesting.
For
And
sure.
I'll go back to China. This is the other thing, like with China. You made the comment because it's a big, diverse country. Often because we don't know any better because we never leave our own country, we just think of just China and everybody in the whole country. China geographically is as large as the United States, and literally I think it's 200 ethnic minority groups. And so you travel around in that huge country, and there's different traditions and things depending on and food, and wherever you go. So you're always learning all of these great things. And we have the same thing here. You go to New York, you go to Texas, you go to Florida, you go to California. People are completely different, and there's that much diversity in a country. But you don't understand that until you've experienced it yourself.
And the funny thing is, people do make the assumption of the U.S. saying, "Oh, Americans."
Yeah.
And say there's a lot of Americans. Same way, there's a lot of Chinese people. There's a lot of different types of people.
Yeah,
in that country.
they watch one TV show and that's it for everybody. But you really need to get out there and experience the world.
Right.
So, I forgot the exact quote, but it's like bigotry and prejudice can be cured by travel. It's Mark Twain. That's not the exact quote, but there's so much truth to that. If you physically go experience things firsthand, it's amazing how you have a different perspective.
Right, for sure. Well, I'm so thankful to have that conversation with you. I think it was much more interesting than anyone could have anticipated. Teaching is so much more diverse than just a job in the US or in wherever country you are at. You can learn a lot outside of the job as well.
Well, and if any of your viewers are actually considering teaching, I never thought really about teaching when I graduated from college. And because I grew up in America, there's a lot of pressure about get a job, get a house, get a family, get a dog, do all of this American dream stuff. And in retrospect, if I would have known this existed when I was in college, there's a good chance I would have, because this is one thing you and I talked about before the recording, but I need to throw it out there. The other plus about teaching outside of the United States is just the level of respect you receive from the different cultures. In German, Bahamian, and Chinese culture, all of them, teacher is one of the most respected people of the community. The parents are wonderful. Most of the conversations I've ever had with parents in teaching internationally is what can we do to work together to help your child, and everybody just so appreciative. There's major perks from a financial side. International teaching always pays better than within reason. Like when you go to like the Caribbean, those schools don't pay as well because they're the Caribbean. And they know everybody wants to go there. And Asia pays well more than Europe because most people want to go to Europe. Most people are afraid of going to Asia. But the pay is incredible. The other perks typically includes housing and some other stipends that come along with, and then just the availability of travel and seeing other parts. And since I left the United States 17 years ago, I've been to 56 countries.
Wow.
And that's all because we have better holidays as international teachers. We usually get a 2-week fall break, a Christmas break, a winter break, and then the summer break, and that allows me to go experience other cultures, see other countries. And typically you can fly for pretty cheap once you get over to Asia, to other countries.
For sure.
Yeah,
I mean, the world's quite big out there, and there's a lot of opportunity.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.